Hey there, Course 1. Lesson 64 takes us back to the geometric concept of quadrilaterals. What do you remember about quadrilaterals? Clue quad. Quad means four. Laterals makes us think of lines or sides. So we're going to group together, we're going to organize into groups, into categories, four-sided figures, such as these, or these, or these. Okay? Sloppy, but you get the point. This table, page 333, is one you will not have memorized right off the bat. So maybe use a little plastic tab to bookmark or write a note in your math notes for lesson 64 that page 333 is very helpful for referencing, and the more you use it for homework, the more it'll stick in your head, and you won't need it anymore for tests. That's why it's important to do your homework for the next 10 lessons, so that by the time we do have our test, you don't need to rely on this quite as heavily. Let's start with one of the more familiar words. Let's start with square. We can classify four-sided figures a lot of different ways, whether it's by angles, by sides, or by the way the sides relate to each other. In this case, a square means four-sided figure, but all sides are equal, so we can call it a rectangle with equal sides. Rectangle tells us something about the angles, and equal sides, of course, tells us something about the sides. What does rectangle tell us about the angles? Well, think about how a rectangle compares to some shape like this. What's the difference in the angles? We get these 90-degree angles, these right angles in a rectangle. They kind of sound the same. Right angle rectangle. So rectangle tells me I'm going to have four 90-degree right angles. And then equal sides means I've got a square. Rectangles only have two sets of equal-sided sides, equal measure sides, but square all four are. So a square's definition is a rectangle with equal sides. It tells us something about its angles and about its sides. In this case, parallelograms have those right angles called rectangle, but the sides don't all have to be the same. So all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. All it takes is right angles. Another familiar one is the trapezoid. You oftentimes think about a picture like this one. However you think of that, kind of looks like a triangle with the top cut off. The technical definition is that we've got parallel sides, but only one pair can be parallel. Now, what does parallel mean? Parallel means if they kept going on forever, which is technically what a line is, these will never touch. Why? Because they are perfectly equal from each other, equidistant at all times, from all places. They never slant towards each other. This is always, let's say, 1 inch apart. No matter where I go on the lines, they will always stay parallel. Maybe that way, maybe this way, parallel, maybe this way, oblique, parallel. They never touch. They go on forever in infinity, never touching. At the same angle, I guess. A way to remember that is that the L's in parallel are parallel. So if you only have one pair of those, it's a trapezoid, meaning the other two can't be parallel and would therefore eventually, if I thought of them as continuing, they would touch, up here or something. So only one pair of parallel sides is the trapezoid. Now here's one you've maybe never heard, the trapezium. No sides parallel, but we can still put it in this table because it's got four sides. Two pairs of parallel sides, well, that's so much parallel going on, let's just call it a parallelogram. Parallelogram means these two sides are parallel to each other, and another pair parallel. Not all sides parallel to each other, that would never make a shape, but two pairs that are each parallel to each other. Finally, the rhombus, don't forget the H, means a parallelogram with equal sides. All squares are rhombuses because they also have two sets of parallel sides like a parallelogram. But what's different between a square and a rhombus? Again, it's that angle relationship. Squares have the 90 degrees. Okay, so that's a lot of fun information. You can recap on your own with this excellent table. Squares, rectangles, and rhombuses are also parallelograms. Notice that a square is a special kind of rectangle, which is a special kind of parallelogram, which is a special kind of quadrilateral, which is a special kind of polygon, which is another word for shapes. So they all kind of fit together like that. A square is also a kind of rhombus. We talked about all that. How about the question, example 1, page 334. Is this true or false? All parallelograms are rectangles. You'd have to look back at the chart if this was in your homework and think, all parallelograms, parallelogram, all of them are rectangles. A rectangle is a parallelogram with right angles. Well, we're literally parallelograms in the definition, so I have to say true. But you think back to it, it's not just a parallelogram. That parallelogram has to have right angles, and there are parallelograms that don't. For example, this one, the one they show. So actually, it's false. See how this can really twist your mind into a bit of a pretzel? It almost got me there. How about example 2? Really think about it. Draw a pair of parallel lines, then draw another pair. They should intersect. There's two sets of words we need to be familiar with. Parallel we've been talking about. They'll never touch. Intersect means they cross. So first we draw the parallel lines. Then we draw the intersecting parallel lines. Technically, a line should always have arrows or it's wrong to show that they're going on forever. What's the name of this quadrilateral on the inside? Well, it even looks like our parallelogram example because parallelograms are two pairs of parallel sides. Okay? Parallelogram. What's a quadrilateral? Four-sided figure or shape or polygon. I'm good with all three of those words for figure. B, describe the difference between parallelogram and trapezoid. It's all about how many pairs of parallel sides. You only have one with the trapezoid. You've got two with the parallelogram. Pairs of parallel sides. Draw a rhombus that is a square. Just draw a square, okay? And then understand why is it a rhombus? Because, well, let's double check so I don't say this wrong. It's a rhombus too because a rhombus is really a parallelogram with equal sides. So you just have to make sure you draw it with right angles for letter B. Sorry, letter C. So letter D, I'll let you figure out what does that need to look like to not be a square. So do D and then answer true or false for E and F, please. D, E, F.